Two.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today. I'm Scott Peterson, Manager of Media Relations. This is County Executive Elridge's weekly media briefing. Sorry for the brief delay in start. Today, Mark will be having his guest will be Montgomery County Civic Federation President Cheryl Gannon, and we're happy to have her. So without further ado, let me turn it over to County Executive Mark Elridge. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon. Is it actually afternoon? I guess it is. Thanks for joining us again this week. And I want to start by talking a little bit about what I'm going to be doing tonight. The County Council is going to have the first of two public hearings on the proposed University Boulevard corridor plan. I want to talk about my very serious concerns about this plan. In fact, I'm concerned enough that I'm going to go down and testify at the public hearing tonight at Blair High School. And I haven't done that before as county executive. I'm deeply concerned about this plan in particular, and I'm also concerned about the implications for planning throughout the county, because everything bad about this on University Boulevard is going to be bad wherever the county tries to do this. And we're going to show you a set of slides, and I can have my staff make available my comments, hopefully, so that you can, if you don't get everything down while I'm talking, you can actually see what I've been talking about. Last week, per county guidelines, I submitted a memo outlining numerous concerns with the plan, and I want to mention some of them now. This plan represents a new approach called corridor planning, a concept that was introduced in Thrive Montgomery 2050. I'm going to point out that Thrive was basically done under a rock. Planning board persisted during the middle of COVID to go ahead with a major rezoning of the county or a major change in the master or general plan for the county at a time when people couldn't even come together and talk about things and really relied on Zoom meetings with limited amounts of time for public input and basically no real community meetings. And it's a real problem. It includes things that if the public had known about it at the time, they probably would have gotten pretty negative feedback about it. And the Thrive 2050 plan, general plan, was considered during the pandemic. It was approved in 2022. While Thrive 2050 created this corridor concept, residents were told the details be worked out through the master plan process. Little did they know that the planning board had plans to change the master plan process. University Boulevard corridor plan is the first of the Thrive corridors, and there are 8 more identified in Thrive, and you can see them on the map. Corridors, like University Boulevard, used to be part of other master plans, and what they've done is hive off this road and a block on either side of it, a block or more on either side of it, and designated them as separate master plans. And it really cuts the community out. It pretends that University Boulevard isn't part of the neighborhoods that front on University Boulevard. And it's a convenient way to make sure they cut as many people out of the process as possible. So I want to lay out some of my concerns about this. And first of all, probably one of the biggest ones is the corridor planning is based on a false premise that the county needs to zone for more housing. And I want you to be careful how you listen to that. We're not saying we don't need more housing. We absolutely need more housing. We don't need to zone for it. Our existing approved master plans already provide zoning capacity for approximately 120,000 units, enough for 300,000 residents. That number doesn't reflect 100% build out of capacity. So there's even more potential beyond that. Forecasted growth is 200,000 residents over the next 25 years going to 2050. And that means that the capacity that we've zoned for exceeds demand. I'm not making this up. In October 2019, the executive director of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments wrote a letter confirming that, quote, the results of this initial assessment confirmed that the region can accommodate within existing comprehensive plans and zoning significantly more housing than the additional 100,000 units called for in the board direction. In April, the planning directors reported that they had further determined that all the additional housing could be accommodated within the region's activity centers and planned network of high-capacity transit areas. In other words, we planned for this. And that's important to know because this is different than many other jurisdictions. Given that Montgomery County does not need additional zoning to accommodate future residents, this is a plan to let developers go after existing neighborhoods by creating a false sense that there's nowhere else left to development. And this started a few years ago when Planning Chair Casey Anderson did two things. He started talking about the percent of land in the county that was zoned single family, and then leapt immediately to the false conclusion that with so little land left, what choice did we have but to resort to rezoning? This is one of the most disingenuous actions by a planning director that I've ever seen. And basically, because he knows planning, he's telling people that, look, we got this limited amount of land left, and my God, we got all these people coming here, and therefore we just have to do rezoning. He should have known better. In fact, he did know better. When I heard where this was going, planning went on to produce another document called Beyond TOD, and that was assuming that we were ready to go beyond transit-oriented development. And I thought that was odd because we weren't even close to building out our planned TOD sites. If you think about it, Wheaton is virtually underdeveloped. That's a major TOD site. White Flint, totally underdeveloped. You have the vacant learner property plus other underutilized properties. There are literally tens of thousands of housing units that could be built that aren't being built right now. If this were coming from a layperson, I could believe this is an honest mistake. I mean, a normal person listening to a number like that would say, well, gee, what are we going to do? Coming from a planning official, director or planning staff, or from the planning board members makes this a deliberate distortion. And that distortion has been parroted by some council members in pushing these plans. So why is it a distortion? It's a distortion because they're intimately involved in the creation of the jobs and housing forecasts. They know that the forecasts are based on their estimates. And when I say their, I mean the planning board's estimates of how much of the existing zoning will be built out over a 30-year horizon. Current estimate spans 2020 to 2050. So they know full well that we're planned to accommodate future growth. And that does set us apart from some of the other counties in the state. For them to pretend that they have no way to accommodate additional growth in the county unless they do rezoning is flat out disingenuous and dishonest. The projections come from the planning board in the round forecast. We're currently in round 10. The planning board and council members aren't even bothered to tell you that the housing projections for 2030 actually dropped by 6,000 units or 16,000 units, depending what baseline number you're looking at. But the current projection puts us at about 25,000 units, actually 24,000 and change, down from what they were projecting was 30,000 units. So the crisis they keep talking about apparently isn't really a crisis. The other thing they don't tell you, they don't tell you this because it disrupts their narrative. They want to create, and they've tried to create a sense of urgency and desperation that, but for making these changes, how are we going to house people coming here in the future? Well, it's, from my perspective, it's really a bit alarming that people are saying, where are we going to house people when they're the people who are actually in charge of doing the planning and zoning, so they actually know what their numbers are. All this is going to do is shift development away from planned areas like Wheaton and other activity centers. And again, going back to what was intended in the county, we'd planned for about 23 activity centers. Wheaton and the other metro areas are scheduled for a lot of development. Wheaton has seen very little development to date. And right now, we have over 30,000 units that already are approved that aren't being built. So this is a very weird housing problem. If you have all this demand, which people assert is there, normally demand calls forth supply, but this unbuilt pipeline has been in place for more than a few years. And it's a real indication that either the demand isn't there or what the planning board is zoned for in most of its rezoning is too much high rise and too much expensive housing and not enough housing for the income of people who want to live in Montgomery County. Upzoning additional areas isn't going to bring more people. All it does is change the location of development. Anybody who winds up living in a new townhouse along University Boulevard or within a neighborhood over there is somebody who was planned to live in Wheaton or one of the other communities where we were planning to add townhouses and additional apartments. So it draws people away from areas that we had already planned for growth, which means that they're adjacent to Metro Rail and bus hubs, and this is where jobs were supposed to be located. So we had, done planning in the county that tried to line access to transit, access to job, access to new housing in the centers throughout the county so that you didn't wind up sprawling development out along the roads in Montgomery County, which makes it harder to capture those people as riders, and it makes it harder, it makes them totally auto dependent um, to get to work. They're not going to be walking to any jobs along University Boulevard, which is what you might have had happen had development gone into Wheaton. And drawing people away from the planned downtowns, you're actually pulling away higher income households that are needed to create an income balanced community in these downtowns. Rather than putting more market housing in single family neighborhoods, those units should stay where they were planned. The last thing this county needs to do is encourage or create more economic segregation in housing than we already have in the county. Furthermore, this incentivizes redevelopment of existing naturally occurring affordable housing units. And when they did just passed the first zoning, I think it was 2502, almost half the units in that plan that are going to be affected are rental units, and most of the rental units are occupied by minorities. You're going to lose a bunch of affordable ownership or rental opportunities, and you're going to lose them for primarily a minority population that's not going to have another place to go. And again, it's astounding the park and planning response to when I won't say who it was, but one of the board members, when asked about this, said they'll find someplace else to live. Um, if you know anything about the incomes of people who live there, they're not going to find someplace else to live. They were lucky to get rental housing on, even if it was on University Boulevard. It is not something that's readily available, particularly in the form of a single family home. The upzoning also inflates land prices and it undermines affordable housing. Real estate people have been very clear that new housing in existing neighborhoods will be the same or higher than existing housing. And this is confirmed by a study the Park and Planning itself did. They did a study of East Silver Spring, and this is back when they were calling the attainable housing plan the affordable plan. And after they did the study, they changed the name of their plan from affordable to attainable because the result of the study said in East Silver Spring that if you converted a single family house to a duplex or triplex, then you would wind up with housing that was as expensive or more expensive than was already in the neighborhood. So there went the idea that what they were doing is about affordability. That didn't stop them from trying to do what they were trying to do. They just stopped pretending that it was about affordability. So this is not about benefiting single family homeowners by giving them an option to increase the density on their lots. It is highly unlikely that hundreds of homeowners are suddenly going to decide in a coordinated way to increase the density on their lots and build a synergistic development along the roads that Park and Planning is targeting for redevelopment. In order to execute the Planning Board vision, this is not going to be created by hundreds of homeowners. What's really going to turn out is that you're going to have single family neighborhoods, which are being looked at by townhouse developers as today's greenfields. We've heard townhouse developers bemoan the lack of greenfields in the county that are available for new development. And it's true. The county no longer has vast acreage that hasn't been developed. Opening up single family neighborhoods would enable them to buy blocks of housing, which is what's going to happen. And they're going to pay more than current market prices so they can build their townhouses and also add commercial uses. Nothing affordable is going to come out of this. If people had wanted urban density, and I'm talking about the residents, they would have chosen different places to live. And for as long as I've been engaged in planning processes in this county, which is like 4 decades now, what we've promoted, when we've promoted the county, we often are promoting our single family neighborhoods to potential residents. Now we're telling people that there's no guarantee that the neighborhood that you chose to live in or might want to live in will actually remain that neighborhood. And not because of what residents want, but because of what planners want. And that's not the way the planning process is supposed to work. I'm fully aware that other jurisdictions, Minneapolis, halfway across the country, but Arlington next door and some other cities around the country have engaged in rezoning. But if you look at what happened to them and the situation they were in, those jurisdictions were unable to accommodate what they thought was going to be the future, what they think is going to be their future growth potential. They're not able to accommodate it within their existing built environment. Arlington is largely built out. There aren't green fields left in Arlington. There isn't significant planned additional growth to accommodate who they think is coming here. And without capacity, these jurisdictions were left to make decisions about rezoning the existing parts of their counties or cities in order to accommodate future growth pressures. Montgomery County is different, and as I've shown already, we already zoned and we already have the capacity. So we've put ourselves from years of work by various councils and various planning boards of putting ourselves in a position where we actually have planned for future growth, and the planning board is now pretending that that's not what we've done. Um, We've also lost community-based planning, and this is something the planning board's been, very determined to do. In the past, master plans relied on advisory boards. I actually served on an advisory board. I was appointed to the sector plan committee that redid downtown Silver Spring. And on these boards were residents, businesses, and developers who worked with staff to create our master plans and sector plans. There was significant community and business input into these processes, and the plans were actually voted on by these boards and sent forward. The planning department's completely gotten rid of community involvement. They go out to the community, they start by telling them what they plan on doing. They get comments from the community. They largely ignore the comments from the community and then send the document forward to the council. I'm glad the council is taking the trouble to actually have a large community meeting on this because the planning board didn't do this. And I expect there'll be a large crowd out there tonight at Blair. This is not what the planning board is doing is not the way to do planning, and undermining, the history of planning in the county is not doing us any good. Back in the days when we had advisory boards, the role of the planning staff was to inform. So when we were sitting around and talking about downtown Silver Spring, and excuse me for getting wonky about this, but one of the things that the planners brought to our attention was that the buildings that were built in downtown Silver Spring weren't around the metro, which is where they had anticipated development to occur when they put the metro in place. And so they were looking to change zoning that would facilitate more development closer to metro and less development on the fringes, or less tall development on the fringes of downtown Silver Spring. We wrestled with schools, we wrestled with traffic, we wrestled with all the issues you're supposed to deal with, and we did it at a community level. That doesn't happen anymore. The current approach dismisses residents, and the community feels ignored and alienated. This shouldn't be a shock to anybody. And the rhetoric around this has at times demonized single-family neighborhoods. Some have gone so far as to blame it for the county's segregated past. And the problem is that segregation here was rooted in land covenants that blocked the sale or rental of property to both Blacks and Jewish people pretty much throughout the county. After the Civil War, the Black population of the county was around 30% or more. And between 1870 and 1960, that population significantly declines to under 4% by 1960. And that's because Black families had no place to move and no place to buy land because they were locked out of land in the county. After they were initially successful in buying land around the end of the Civil War, their ability to buy land declined over time. And so as families grew, dividing up a small farm only goes so far. And so, many of their descendants had to leave the county to find work because Blacks not only couldn't live here, they also couldn't work here. It also helped lead to the decline of the population. But by 1967, when discriminatory covenants were banned in Montgomery County, the Black population began growing, and they happily moved into single-family neighborhoods from which they'd been previously excluded. Montgomery County integrated, and it didn't require getting rid of single-family zoning. It required getting rid of covenants that prevented people from owning land. And the conflation with single-family zoning and segregation is really disingenuous in the case of the county. Landowners went out of their way to make sure they had covenants to protect their property from winding up in the hands of Black people. Single family wasn't the issue. If it had been left as single family zoning without covenants, this place would have been integrated a long time ago. Corridor plans ignore the broader scope of master plans that was outlined in Thrive. They're ignoring schools, they're ignoring parks, they're ignoring transportation, traffic, parking, and other amenities and facilities. The narrow boundaries of the University Corridor Plan prevent meaningful analysis of infrastructure, overcrowding, or park needs. And it's a significant departure, and frankly, it's antithetical to the recommendations of Thrive 2050 itself. This new corridor plan approach seems solely focused on producing as much housing as possible by rezoning single-family neighborhoods without adequately addressing other essential elements. The corridor plans pretend that the main street serving the community isn't part of the community. University Boulevard is present in several master plans all along the corridor. All this artifice is done is to prevent the community from having a role in shaping the major artery that it relies on. This is just another example of park and planning bending over backwards to cut people out of our processes, and the council should not validate this approach. Plan is based on bus rapid transit line that's not even in the planning stages. This wouldn't even be a priority line in the scheme of bus rapid transit lines because it does not serve businesses, it does not serve concentrations of jobs. It is not the right place to focus on your, first major investments in bus rapid transit. And again, bus rapid transit was meant to pick people up along the way. I support BRT. I came up with the original map for BRT in 2008. But right now, University Boulevard is just a line on the map. It has no funding in the 6-year capital budget, even for planning, much less construction. And we honestly don't know when it will be built, but it's certainly not one of the top priorities. It does not serve a job corridor. We cannot and should not encourage immediate upzoning and increased density based on an unknown future plan. In the past, development was tied to infrastructure that went with it. It was called staging, and that ended more than 10 years ago. Moreover, the BRT was primarily meant to move people via transit. Stops along the road were meant to be for riders in the adjacent areas. They are not stations in the sense that the planning department is envisioning increasing density around every stop. This is not at all what was intended with BRT. The reality is that the net effect will be to add more traffic, not less traffic to the road. I will give you an example of that. If you were to add 4,000 potential new workers out of the rezoning that Park and Planning's talking about, and you were lucky enough to capture 20% on BRT, that means you would have 800 riders and add 3,200 cars. So rather than improving congestion, as the planning board asserts, it actually is going to make the situation around University Boulevard worse. That same development, were to go to activity centers in the downtowns that we had planned it for, provides more local job opportunities that people could actually walk to, and more options to move in different directions to work, whether by car or by transit. So it is actually the worst place to be doing development. The best place is in the centers that we planned for it. Of course, there are already long lines backing up along Colesville Road for entrance to the Beltway. Some of the plan's proposals could drastically exacerbate the situation. The only discussion of impacts on existing traffic is in Appendix F, which is not attached or even referenced in the draft itself. So if you're a resident, good luck finding it. Furthermore, the narrow, arbitrary boundaries of the plan do not include enough of the road network to assess the consequences of changes to University Boulevard on other roads. The plan proposes realignment of streets and connection of streets. Connection of streets means getting rid of dead ends. It's all designed to facilitate more cars moving through neighborhoods. That's not why people move to quiet suburban neighborhoods, to have more through roads that would induce more traffic, or to have commercial uses planted in the middle of the suburban neighborhoods. We didn't plan these as urban centers, and the streets aren't designed for the level of traffic that conceivably can come with this. And adding more through traffic is not going to be something that's positive for the communities. The realignments would necessitate several new signaled intersections on University Boulevard, while the proposed street connections would convert dead-end streets into through streets and again, can add more cut-through traffic through the neighborhoods. This is certainly not something people want. The impacts of these changes, of course, are not analyzed or addressed, not even in the appendix. The planned zoning directly conflicts with the recently passed ZTA 2502. Residents are confused by the different housing proposals. I will say there's something similar to what Donald Trump is doing and what the planning board's doing, because you're getting the 2502 ZTA and you're getting the corridor plan for here, and you've got attainable housing behind it, where people are getting overwhelmed with what the planning board is talking about and not having any opportunity to digest or have a role in this. University Boulevard Corridor Plan proposes rezoning the predominantly R60, R90, and R200 neighborhoods to the CRN zone. You can see the maps on pages 27 and 28. The plan goes beyond the ZTA with rezoning that reaches beyond corridor fronting properties and bifurcates established neighborhoods, leaving some sections in an existing master plan area and moving other sections into the University Boulevard Corridor Plan. Again, this is a disingenuous and frankly, I would say unprecedented and unjustified bifurcation of communities. These operate as cohesive wholes, and treating these as things you can just draw a line on the map and say this is separate from that is not a very genuine way to do planning. And of course, in none of this are the full impacts on the communities taken into account. You can see in the map, 193 is University Boulevard, for people who don't know that, and then you can see the neighborhoods along it that are encompassed in the dotted lines. Then that's the area that's the target of redevelopment. And we've got a shopping center at University in Colesville. We've got a shopping center in Wheaton. The idea that we're going to try to add commercial things in between those two things along the 3.5 mile line is probably not a sensible thing either. This is also not about affordable housing. The existing area is already affordable area with renters and single family homes, people who live on or near the University Boulevard corridor, many in naturally affordable homes have come out to voice opposition, but their concerns were dismissed. We could see displacement of renters and the loss of cherished neighborhood serving businesses as naturally affordable housing is replaced. And this plan does not even have a policy of no net loss of affordability. Anything that has to do with affordability is aspirational. Anything that gives developers additional capacity is concrete. It's kind of a reverse way of doing things. The environment, this plan will inevitably result in reduced tree coverage and increased imperviousness, contrary to climate change goals. The Department of Environmental Protection points out that increasing allowed density and the intensity of development will almost certainly result in a decrease in tree canopy, increase in impervious surfaces. It means increased heat island effect, reduced absorption of stormwater, and greater flooding risks, directly contrary to our climate change goals. When planning staff presented the plan to council yesterday, they did not mention the lack of funding for BRT, convenient omission. Instead, they focused on safety for pedestrians and bikers and rollers. It is absolutely absurd to talk about rezoning neighborhoods and attribute this to a safety concern. If you want to address safety, you actually address it on University Boulevard. There's no question that improving safety on University is a priority. It is actually ranked high on the state's list of serious injury crashes, and it's the only county road in the state's pedestrian action plan that will recommend safety enhancements this fall. So the council and the planning board should have a role in shaping the pedestrian action plan, and so we should be able to deal with pedestrian safety without going through rezoning the neighborhood. And like I said, it is ludicrous to suggest that rezoning the interior neighborhood or changing even the zoning on University Boulevard to actually increase the number of cars and buildings on that road has anything to do to enhance safety. But there are ways to address the safety issues without tying them to the plan that increases density. And focusing on safety issues now is a newly emphasized approach that takes away the focus from the fact that the rezoning proposed in this and future corridor plans will destroy the existing master plan process in favor of plans that are not supported by facts and deliberately diffuse community involvement. There is a better way to achieve our housing goals, more housing types and more affordable housing by revising the master plans that were zoned for high densities but haven't been built out yet. For example, we've zoned for too much high rise in the county. I have actually intervened on behalf of a developer who was told by planning board that they did not want, not by the board, but by planning staff, that they did not want to approve his project if he changed it from high rises to lower rise buildings and townhouses. Because what the planning board wanted was high rises, and what the developer tried telling them was that there's no market for high rises. There is lots of zoning for high rises in the county, and it's probably too much given the population projections going forward. It also means a lot of land is tied up, sitting there, waiting for enough demand to justify a let property owner in building a 250 or 300-foot tall building. Um, you're not spec building residential anymore. And so, one of the questions the planning board has not answered is why, with 30,000 units already approved, uh, we're having a problem building things. If there was a demand usually calls forth supply. People don't build supply without there being demand for it. And so there's a very serious question as to why either the high rises haven't been built out or by why some of the master plans haven't been built out or haven't been built out more to a greater degree than they are right now. Um, our view is that the planning board should look at the master plans that really haven't been built out. And if they want to try different housing forms in those master plans, it's pretty easy to do because those plans have no involvement with going into existing neighborhoods. So you could accomplish this um, on a much more open tableau with much less impact on existing communities and still get the housing you want. And if it's about housing types, I don't know why you wouldn't look at your existing plans that haven't been built and take advantage of this as an opportunity to revise the housing types that you think you need. Most residents are very supportive of efforts to increase housing affordability, but they want us to find a way to get there without adding to our problems. Exacerbating traffic jams, overcrowding schools, and damaging our environment or overtaxing county services and infrastructure is not a very smart way forward. And there's a better way to do this. And it starts with rejecting the University Boulevard corridor plan. And I think the county should basically abandon the corridor approach in general and focus more on looking at what it's already zoned and trying to develop what we've already said we were going to develop rather than putting development where it doesn't belong. But we also need to return to a more inclusive planning process that goes through careful review and consideration, more importantly, genuinely listens to and engages and involves our community. My guest this week represents many people in our community through her roles as president of the Woodside Civic Association and the Montgomery County Civic Federation. Cheryl Gannon is one of many residents who feel blindsided by this attempt to ignore master plans and change neighborhoods through zoning. And I asked her to come on today and talk about what she's hearing from her neighbors. So welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Gannon, and I'm the president of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. I'm also a resident of the Woodside neighborhood in downtown Silver Spring. The Civic Federation is a 100-year-old nonprofit countywide umbrella group of civic, homeowner, and community associations in Montgomery County. And through our members, we now reach over 40,000 households. We have a strong commitment to a transparent and inclusive planning process, including master planning with resident community voices in the future of their neighborhoods. This University Boulevard corridor plan jettisons the master plan process that has been in place for decades and which allows growth and development to be implemented on a scale tailored to individual neighborhoods. Under the UBC corridor plan, neighborhoods are not treated as individual suburban residential communities, but are treated simply as part of large land masses for upzoning for developer opportunities. Doing it this way just invites problems from infrastructure to stormwater management, school spaces, traffic problems, and the loss of naturally occurring affordable housing. It's important to note that everything done in the UBC plan could be done in master plans. The only thing missing is community engagement, visioning, and buy-in to the plans, and that's just not okay. I want to thank the county executive for highlighting these issues today and for including us in this briefing. Our members have expressed profound concerns about the UBC plan, and these concerns are shared by residents both inside and outside of the plan area, as this appears to us to be a prototype for future corridor plans across the county. The problems with the plan are numerous. I will try to list a few specifics. The plan upzones over 500 homes that are priced more moderately than many homes in many areas of the county and seeks to replace those homes with market rate multifamily housing. The council must answer the question of how this helps us to remove over 500 moderately priced homes from the inventory of available homes for purchase and potentially or really likely replace it with more expensive housing or rental housing. The plan places apartment buildings, some up to 100 feet tall, in commercial spaces near established, stable residential neighborhoods. The plan also expands denser development inside the corridors into single-family neighborhoods. Why is this necessary or desirable to disrupt these neighborhoods? There's no racial equity study on potential displacement and no measures to prevent displacement. The council should request a study from the Office of Legislative Oversight immediately. The racial equity and social justice review requirements should also be amended to include master plans on an ongoing basis. This plan is in conflict with the pending More Housing Now proposal and reneges on promises made by the council to residents during the discussion that corridor developments would not extend into neighborhoods, and the ink isn't even dry yet on that proposal. The plan assumes a functional BRT system when in fact it won't be implemented within the 20-year horizon for this plan. The plan removes several lanes of car traffic on University Boulevard in an area that already experiences serious congestion, and without a BRT and without a study of the impacts on traffic and parking. Changes in traffic patterns will result in increased cut-through traffic in neighborhoods and the immediate environment for those who chose homes on quiet streets. Many residents support the plans for the wider sidewalks, a more tree canopy, and green space, but those amenities will not be provided concurrently with these developments, but perhaps at some later date under CIP funding, which is scarce in this budget environment and may not happen at all. The county has no plan or tools to encourage home ownership and the wealth building and equity opportunity that home ownership brings. 95% of the multifamily housing that was built in downtown Silver Spring and Bethesda from 2017 to 24 is rental housing. What is the plan to promote home ownership? Many of our members are concerned that developments of this type invites investors to buy what could have been a home ownership opportunity. What is the plan to prevent investors from buying single-family homes? The formula for calculating school space has been flawed for a very long time. Residents want that improved and schools built out to accommodate growth as it happens. The master plan process must be restored. In my neighborhood, we have 3 different townhouse developments that were incorporated over time with resident engagement, saving trees and green space, and adding sidewalks for safety of pedestrians. Residents endorsed duplexes by right during the discussion of the Silver Spring Plan, and currently there's a faith-based affordable housing church project in the works. Constructive engagement with residents works and allows for progress consistent with neighborhood amenities and characteristics, while these top-down, one-size-fits-all projects just create alienation, create problems, and slows down progress. We will be urging the council to reject this plan.
Thank you, Ms. Gannon. We will now go to questions about this growth corridor plan for County Executive or Ms. Gannon. Please raise your hand if you have any questions or follow-up. Anybody? Okay. Marcus, you want to follow up with Ms. Gannon about anything else?
No, I'm really glad you were here today. I think it's effective, and I will see you tonight, I think.
All right. Well, one more time. Any other questions in case someone wanted to jump back in here on this?
Just wanted to say thanks to Mark for inviting the Civic Fed today.
You guys need to be heard.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Gannon. I'm sorry there was no questions, but we will move on. And thank you for your time and effort on this issue.
Thank you.
Mark, back to you.
All right. So Monday starts the beginning of Hispanic Heritage Month, and our Hispanic community, which makes up more than 21% of Montgomery County, is significant. Families from El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, and beyond make our county stronger. And normally it is a joyous 30 days of celebrations of the contributions of the Hispanic community in our community. This year, there's a cloud of fear and concern over federal immigration policies that have led to a ramp up of ICE activity and the over-policing of Black and brown communities. In Montgomery County, we've noticed the impact. Events that routinely draw big crowds, like the Salvadoran Festival at the Ag Fairgrounds, are put on the shelf this year. People were afraid to have that big fair at the fairgrounds, or the big event at the fairgrounds, because they were very fearful that ICE agents would come and arrest a large crowd of people there. Some fear that they can't go to work or send their kids to school without being targeted by federal immigration enforcement. As a county, we're working closely with our communities and community partners to share important information with communities so that they are able to continue to use the critical services here in the county. And now more than ever, it's important to help them understand their rights. The targeted attacks on the Hispanic communities just because they look Latino or speak Spanish really angers me, and it's a disservice to the values and traditions this country was founded on. Um, there was so much work done in terms of getting rid of racial profiling and generally accepted that people should not just be arrested or picked up because of what they looked like. And to come back to a situation where the assumption made by the federal government is, as somebody said, if you're brown, you're going down, is really repulsive. The idea that you can just look at somebody and decide they must be illegal and you have the right to arrest them and bring them in is really disturbing. And even when somebody winds up being released because they shouldn't have been taken in the first place, nobody should be subjected to that kind of terror and the feeling of insecurity it produces just because the federal government is trying to intimidate people into leaving. The federal government policy equates to meaning that if you're brown and have a manual labor job, you must be illegal. And I grew up at a time when openly hating someone was based on their race was okay. Many schools were segregated, and there was a fierce fight to keep it that way. There are a lot of similarities between those backward racist viewpoints and the way the federal government is treating Black and brown communities today. And they want to convince the nation they're the enemy, and that is just wrong. We stand with our neighbors in this struggle, and we insist that people be treated fairly. Our Hispanic communities have had positive impact in our community for many years. They hold jobs in our county, contribute local tax revenue, and have spending power. Montgomery County is the most diverse, one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse county in the United States. And we're not looking to change that. Our message, I hope they hear this, is that we thank them for all they bring to our community. Please don't lose hope and don't let fear win. We're all in this together, and we're going to do what we can do to continue to make sure that you have access to services and you feel safe here. And finally, the assertion that Trump is cutting off these communities from taxpayer funds is actually inaccurate. I mean, I've gotten the letters, for example, on Head Start, where they actually talk about, American taxpayers should not be funding these programs for undocumented people. I want to point out that immigrant workers, most of whom are now, not under the table and working for legitimate businesses, construction companies, restaurants, hotels, all kinds of jobs in the state and the county. They have state and federal taxes deducted from their paychecks. They're not exempt from taxation. If they own homes, and many of these people do own homes, we get their taxes. And if they rent, we're getting taxes from them from the rental properties. It's ironic because Trump actually should love this situation because the workers are paying taxes, yet they're ineligible to receive services from many programs already because of their immigration status. So in short, they're paying taxes and unable to use services. I don't get why the president doesn't think this is his dream scene. I want to note that this is going to be an ongoing issue. We're monitoring what the federal government's doing, and we remain concerned about what happens when the big, beautiful actual budget finds its way to Congress in October, and the amount of money going into ICE is certainly concerning. The target is $40 billion for ICE, which basically gives them the ability to raise an ICE army to carry out evictions on a much grander scale than what they're able to do right now. So we'll see where this all goes. Hopefully, some people in Congress will come to their senses and realize not having people working in your farms or in your meat packing plants or in your restaurants or shops or construction is actually going to be a big negative impact on economic growth in the country. But we'll see who actually comes to their senses. I have some great news and to share about our ongoing efforts to ensure safe and healthy housing for everyone. Our latest troubled property report for FY25 shows a 69% decrease in the total number of units on the list we compile every year, dropping from 7,269 units in FY24 to just 2,264 units this past year. This means thousands more of our residents are living in safer conditions. We've also seen a 57% decrease in units on the at-risk list, going from 6,375 units last year to 2,740 units in FY25, which is really incredible progress. We're not stopping here. We're going to get as close to zero with both of these sets of numbers as we can get. Obviously, some landlords are paying attention. Our progress is giving more residents better living conditions, and it's a direct result of our focused strategies. Our DHCA, Department of Housing and Community Affairs, has stepped up enforcement efforts and cracked down on housing code violations. We have new tools we've put in place, which have also helped, a lot like our rent stabilization law, which limits rent increases on properties with violations. So if you're going to violate people's rights, you're going to lose your ability to get a rent increase. This has given landlords a strong incentive to fix problems faster and to get into compliance. And let's not forget the new tenant protection that was in Bill 6-25 passed in April, which further strengthened consumer protections for our residents. These measures have given our enforcement efforts a lot more teeth. Our DHCA code enforcement team completed more than 15,000 mandated inspections of multifamily rental units. Through their work, they identified and ensured the correction of critical health and safety issues like pests, mold, and inadequate fire or carbon monoxide alarms. We've also noticed property owners responding faster. They're addressing violations much sooner than what we've seen in the past, causing the rate of housing code citations for failure to comply to drop by more than half. That's another good sign. The law changes mean properties are now more likely to comply and fix violations when notice of violations are issued. The health and safety of Montgomery County residents remains one of my top priorities. While these results are something to celebrate, our commitment doesn't waver. We're going to keep working diligently to correct housing code violations, protect the well-being of all our residents of the county. And I am encouraged that more landlords are coming into compliance, and I hope this is a trend that eventually gets us to zero problems. That would be nice. September has been designated National Preparedness Month and a time to emphasize the importance of developing a prepared and resilient community. And even with this special distinction, just yesterday, FEMA announced it will close the National Preparedness Toolkit feature, which was used to help outline an organized process for the whole community to follow. How petty do you have to be to close down something that's accessible online? It's just kind of stunning. Emergencies come in all forms, from floods and snowstorms to high winds and power outages during the summer heat wave. It was important for people to be prepared for scorching temperatures. Our county departments activated internal procedures and followed extreme temperature plans to protect lives and ensure a coordinated response. The county helps every family be prepared for planned and unplanned events. We share key information through our Alert Montgomery about weather changes and traffic alerts and more. We also encourage families to build emergency kits and develop plans for family members that cover when people are stuck inside or driven from a home. Montgomery County Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security is going to host a free Ready Montgomery Emergency Preparedness and Public Safety Fair on Saturday, September 13th. It's going to take place from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Wheaton Local Park in Silver Spring, and will feature emergency preparedness talks, CPR, and AED training. Those are the AEDs are the devices for people who are in heart attack, and it's you should be trained to use these things, but the counties help get them out in more facilities around the county. Also, training people in how to control bleeding. Uh, if you can't make it, I encourage you to share the important messages being shared this month about being prepared through the county's social media channels. National Preparedness Month reminds us the importance of individual awareness, community resources, and strong interagency collaboration. And the public's preparedness is one key to our collective resilience during an emergency. On another note involving public health, despite federal government uncertainty and rapid changes in vaccine policy, Maryland has taken steps to ensure continued vaccine access for its residents. Yesterday, Governor Wes Moore emphasized that health, safety, and well-being of Marylanders are the state's North Star, and they will do everything possible to ensure access to life-saving medicines like vaccines. Governor Moore signed the bill passed by lawmakers to ensure that insurance providers, including Medicaid and private insurers, continue to cover the cost of all vaccines recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices as of December 31st, 2024. Obviously, that's before things became insane. This legislation became effective on June 1st, 2025, and is designed to protect against the withdrawal of vaccine coverage for a range of illnesses, not just COVID-19. Last year, another change expanded pharmacists' vaccination authority. This law allows pharmacists to administer flu and COVID vaccines without a prescription to anyone 3 years and older. This expansion makes vaccines more widely available statewide, as pharmacists are authorized to give vaccines in accordance with Maryland law. Here in Montgomery County, we're committed to careful and evidence-based decisions for patient safety and disease prevention. And we're going to hold true to this value even as federal vaccine guidance standards and sources become uncertain. School immunization requirements for children have not changed. Families are encouraged to consult their pediatrician to ensure children are up to date on all recommended vaccines, and our free vaccination program for the uninsured will continue through September. So for more information, visit GoVaxMoco at govaxmoco.com. And before we open it up to questions, I'd like to give my staff an opportunity to provide any updates they want to share, and I'll start with my health team.
So good afternoon, Mr. County Executive. Thanks again for prioritizing our access to care. I'm sure Dr. Asher is going to talk a little bit about the vaccine campaign that we have, but using data to drive access to those who are most vulnerable. So I just wanted to acknowledge that this afternoon. Dr. Asher.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bridgers, and thank you, Mr. County Executive, for highlighting the importance of vaccines during this time. So just another friendly reminder, if your kiddos still need those back to school vaccines, please do visit one of our clinics. You are probably getting a call from your pupil personnel worker at your kiddo's school. So please let us help you make sure that your children are healthy and safe. And now is also a great time for you personally, all of our grown-ups and young people, to go get your COVID vaccines. We are very grateful for the leadership of the state of Maryland that we are eliminating and do not have the barriers to accessing COVID vaccines that we are seeing in other parts of the country. So 'tis the season for respiratory viruses. Protect yourself, protect your neighbors, and thank you.
Starter.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dr.
I just real quickly want to echo what the county executive said about the theme of prayer. Well, first off, it is Preparedness Month, and I echo all the messages that the county executive shared about being prepared for emergencies. But I did also want to reflect on the absurdity of the Federal Emergency Management Agency closing its preparedness toolkit during Preparedness Month. And we received notice from the Maryland Department of Emergency Management yesterday that the toolkit was coming down at the end of the day today. So while you can still access it right now, we've been told you will not be able to access it at some point after, tomorrow you won't be able to access it. And there are a number of resources on there that are not just important in terms of individual preparedness, but there are things that are used to make the way we try to work in emergency management is we try to make use common language and common plans across the country for how we respond to various types of emergencies. And the FEMA Preparedness Toolkit was an effort to try and synergize so we're all using same kinds of terminology and language consistent with the national national disaster management system. And now when you take these tools away, you're going to have more divergent local and state responses, which makes it very difficult for responders who are being brought in from other states to operate inside Maryland, for example, or Maryland responders going elsewhere to have an understanding of some general principles that we all follow. And so I understand the principle that the Federal Emergency Management Agency is really trying to have more local effort around disaster response and preparedness, but not having some national sense of guidelines or overarching structure does not serve that interest at all. And so it's incredibly disappointing and frankly comical that you would do this during Preparedness Month with effectively little to no notice to local and state jurisdictions to do it. So I just wanted to echo those comments and just I tend to be more stoic and I think less judgmental, but this sort of decision is absurd on its face, and I have to reflect on that. So thanks.
All right, thanks, Dr. Stoddard. We'll now open up to any questions from the media. Please raise your hand if you have a question for county executive or any of the government officials. All right, it seems like we have a media briefing with no questions today. Thank you, County Executive Elrich. I'll turn it over to you for any final remarks before we
thanks for being here, and we'll see everybody again next week.
Thanks.